Hey everybody, welcome to week 175. I was at a Viking mergers and acquisitions deal yesterday, and this guy came up to me, Bob Robinson. He sold a few companies, and he says, "Hey, I've been on your weekly webinar. I recognize you from the webinar." and I said, "Well, Bob, we're going to be on tomorrow morning, and it's week 175. So I thought that was pretty funny. And he had done the same thing with Adam at an earlier deal. So it's pretty cool that we've been able to do this for so many weeks with Jack and Adam. And since we're talking about going shopping for talent, I thought I needed to up my game and actually wear a collared shirt. In case I have to go look for a job. Isn't it funny how we've I really like my t-shirts. I got to tell you, I really like those t-shirts.
It's all right. You can be honest. You haven't done your laundry, and so you had to pull one out from inventory, of your collared shirts because you don't have any non-collared shirts. It's okay.
I have stacks of t-shirts that I've amassed during COVID in particular. So that's not an excuse, but we're going to be talking about hiring for talent and like, what are some of the things that we can be doing? And we've been going down some paths that are kind of non-traditional, but that isn't in keeping with an anything but typical CPA firm. But Jack has his stats like dutifully, just like that lawyer that he is, and that doctor that he doesn't ever talk about, but we can talk about, is pretty cool. So Adam, before we launch into Jack's stuff, do you have any rants? You got to be like, we're 9 days away from a potential government shutdown. You've got to have some rants.
I mean, my rant is about that.
Well, there you go. I teed you up.
Yeah, no, it's like I could rant forever, and at the same time, it's like there's nothing that I can do about it.
Nope.
So so I guess the one thing that I can take away from it is this is what happens when compromise doesn't happen and you've got a deadline and you've got a gun to your head. And I mean, you can take, like, that happens in business strategies all the time too. And it's like, you kind of got to think through, okay, I got a short-term win, but what's the long-term consequence, associated with that? And I just think, it'd be an interesting study sometime to go back and sort of look at, okay, if we go back in history and sort of look at gun to the head negotiations, what were the real either direct or indirect, consequences, of that. So I just, I don't even know if that's a provable thing. It's just, it's so highly frustrating. So, but from a hey, what happens if it shuts down, outside of, a potential indirect consequence on interest rates because the cost of borrowing goes up, for our client base, not much, sorry about the dog there, in terms of the consequence. So
well, show the audience Chewbacca. We haven't seen Chewie for a while.
She's actually upstairs marking the door. That was the other dog. So
okay.
Yeah.
Chewie is cute. All right. So Jack, we're talking about going talent shopping and some alternative strategies. I'd be very curious from the gallery, and we'll see if Jason shows up here because oh yeah, Jason is on. So I know, Jason, you've got some ideas on what's going on because you reached out to me on social media and said, hey, this is super timely. I deal with this all the time. So be thinking about your questions, and you can harass us in the chat if you want, but hit us up with the Q&A as we go through this thing, and we want this to be as interactive as possible. So Jack, hit us up with some of the stats that you've amassed.
All right, so I am going to read a little bit of narrative because it basically says it in the most concise way as to kind of what's happened. So here we go. The COVID-19 pandemic caused a major disruption in America's labor force. Some may have referred to it as the Great Resignation. In 2022, more than 50 million workers quit their jobs, many of whom were in search of an improved work-life balance and flexibility, increased compensation, and a strong company culture. That follows the 47.8 million who quit jobs in 2021. But a closer look at what has happened to the labor force can be better described as the Great Reshuffle, because hiring rates have outpaced quit rates since November of 2020. So many workers are quitting their jobs, but many are getting rehired elsewhere. So, and this continues to go on about, and this is from the US Chamber of Commerce, all this information is published, so I got to give them credit for that. And they did talk about food service and hospitality as being kind of the most, the biggest, largest industry that's struggling with those things. And of course, I'm going to share my screen and show you some graphs that they have published showing those things. Okay, let's see. All right, so quit rates by industry. And I know this may be hard to see for some of you, but the order that they are in, leisure, wholesale, professional, are actually the order of the lines that are down below. So financial activities is at the bottom and leisure and hospitality at the top. So you can see close, I mean, in numbers in that leisure and hospitality, as I just said, is at the top. Financial activities are at the bottom. And then you have these other ones, wholesale and resale, retail trade, second from the top. And then they have some other graphs that show labor force shortages by industry. So you see the filled openings and the unfilled openings, and which is interesting because, well, this is shortage. We talked about financial activities maybe, so that's why I would imagine this number, financial activities number is smaller. So that's why there's more unfilled job openings, just it's statistics. And then
what is in financial activities?
What is in the category of financial activities?
What is that? Yeah.
I think it's like banking and lending and those kind of, I mean, core financial activities, but I don't see definitions of what those are. I'd have to, you know, kind of peel it back a little bit. And then unemployment rates, the shaded area is the national unemployment rate for August of 3.8%. And then you can see how those compare to each other. Let's see if I can zoom that in a little bit. All right, so leisure and hospitality at the top, financial activities at the bottom. So as I said, this is unemployment rate by industry, and I think that is it for the graphs. So that's where kind of things are, state of the union kind of ish on that background. So now we can, I think, talk about, well, what do you do moving forward? And of course, I found some articles that are interesting lists of things you might do or not do, including experience from all of us in our own companies and with our clients. So there's the background.
So before that's good stuff, Jack. Thank you. Before we launch in a little bit further, question came in from Jason. How do you find unfindable talent like nurses in the middle of the Midwest, Denison, Iowa? Indeed, LinkedIn job boards are not working, and limitations on how to post jobs limit geofence to broadcast. Hold on. The job, any suggestions when job boards and resume databases are not working? Company is building a new facility and needs to staff up. Healthcare behavioral facility at many levels. Ooh, that's a challenge. Nothing like throwing down the gauntlet fast there, Jason.
I think when you start looking at that, you need to, and this is going to be a very obvious, Captain Obvious response, which is you gotta give them incentives to get out there in the middle of nowhere. And whether it is reallocation, reimbursement, whether it's a higher wage, whether it is giving them skin in the game of the success of the enterprise that is out there. So a lot of it comes down to primarily monetary compensation, but also a better life overall wherever they're at. So even though it's in the middle of nowhere, you have to consider that the infrastructure is there. There's a grocery store, there's a drugstore, there's education for their kids. There's good education for their kids, and not just some, you're an additional school of a school system that is mediocre. So a lot of things that are out of your control, but that you need to be aware of and do some due diligence on. But I think primarily the consideration is compensation, because that translates into, okay, better standard of living, maybe not as crowded, you have some space in between neighbors and those kind of things. So I think monetary primarily, but the other stuff is also important when you're trying to pull people away from the comforts of being in a different area or different population, different amenities, those kind of things. You're on mute.
Yeah. So one thing I was going to say is I talked to Jimmy Molina this morning. We were talking, he owns restaurants and brewery as well. And he said, yeah, we're running the same thing. He said in California, he read a thing where they are now having to offer $20 an hour for just McDonald's hamburger flippers, like $20 an hour. Well, that's crazy. But you brought up a point that I thought was really interesting. I talked with another business owner this morning that moved here from California, and they're like, man, we love it out here. It's like, it was crazy, from Orange County, California. And the one thing that has been a constant thing that we've seen, a lot of people fleeing New York, a lot of people fleeing California, where it was just, the lockdowns were just too much, not very business friendly in particular. And they feel like, hey, kind of hit the jackpot moving here. So the same thing in the Midwest, having been a Midwesterner, growing up there, now's actually a pretty good time to be going and actually hitting hard in these places that have got soaring crime. You go to Chicago, if you don't, that Iowa is not that far from Chicago, and Chicago is a war zone in some places. I've got friends there that they're like, this place is blowing up. So I think that you raised a really good point. I think you have to get very creative in how are you pitching it. I mean, I've been hearing North Dakota has been doing the same sort of thing. I mean, they're advertising like how great it is to live in North Dakota. Well, my wife was born in Fargo, so I'm not sure, February, maybe not, but so anyway, here's another thing that we got here.
Okay,
go ahead.
Can I hop in? Yeah. So, because I'll also address this question as well. So, the other thing you could do is, either pay a recruiter, or at a minimum, take a recruiter out to a nice dinner to ply them with the tricks of their trade. But having, one of my best friends from college is a recruiter, what they do isn't, I mean, it's very good. And at the same time, it's not rocket science. It's a lot of work. I mean, you gotta, so using our profession for an example, we could post an ad, but good luck with that. Instead, what you have to do is you have to go into LinkedIn, set up a search for people that have the attributes that I like, try to link. I mean, you treat them like a prospect, like a new client prospect. You try, you send them in mails, and you're basically working it the same way that you would work a sales pipeline. Only in this case, it's employees. And to the extent that, people are not in a LinkedIn, like I'd suspect, like a nurse is not in LinkedIn, then, you got to go to like the state boards, and just start searching there, for kind of geographic areas where you might convince people to move. And to Gary's point, hit, start the advertising process about how cool it is. But all of that said, you can't, sorry about that, and the dog. All that said, to answer the second question, it's like, oh, I know what. Let's get somebody to move to the hind end of freaking nowhere and relocate, and then pay him jack, and make the cost of living argument. That's just it's a bad strategy. I mean, you gotta. That's not. I don't see that being a viable strategy for anybody, because that's like hey, let's have our cake and eat it too. And we're wondering why we're like, something probably is going to need to have to give in that argument if you're going to be successful.
Yeah, and I'm gonna hit in. Oh, so Mickey D's stories just pay more. So beyond just paying more, we've talked about this in the past, but culture, the intangibles, like think about what people actually want. And I'll use a great example with Tana Green and My Work Choice. They deal with lower wage hourly workers in large companies like Shutterfly or distribution centers like Amazon or whatever, and filling positions. Well, very few people probably grow up, what do you want to do, Jack? As a 5-year-old, I want to be a policeman. I want to be a lawyer. So that was Jack. But, for some of us, it may have been like, I want to be a fireman. Very few people say, I want to be moving boxes in a warehouse. But people need to do it, And so My Work Choice got really creative, and they said, hey, we know that about this workforce, they need flexibility. And they're a lot of times they're working multiple jobs to make ends meet, but they have no flexibility. And then it's like one of your kids gets sick, you have to miss work, three strikes, you're out. What they did is they broke the workforce into an 8-hour shift. They broke it into 2 4-hour shifts, and they job pooled it. So they Uberified it, is what they did, and revolutionized. So I think getting creative is part of it. But what do people want? They want flexibility. They want to know that they're treated with respect. Those kind of things would be in that case. And then the final question was, how does social media play into the how do I find talent I need to run my business? Is there a place to use for use of this? Adam has been actually doing that. So why don't you talk about that?
On the flexibility piece?
Well, no, on how do you use social media
got it. Okay.
to find talent?
Yeah. So it's interesting. So we really at BGW, we've really done 2 things. One is we did exactly like I said. We set up a search on LinkedIn, and drip campaign people that we thought might be good candidates for BGW, even if they already had jobs. And then secondly, which is more of like what a traditional recruiter would do. But what we also did, is someone says, well, who is this guy? I'm going to check him out on Instagram, or I'm going to check out his LinkedIn stuff. We switched our social media to be more focused on what would be interesting information to a potential candidate about what it would be like to be at BGW. And like you could do like some advertise, like we didn't take like the advertising post, like, hey, well, at BGW we offer blah blah blah. Like, maybe at some point we'll do a little bit more of that, but really it was the approach that we took was to be more like a brand. We're funny, irreverent. A lot of my social media posts are like my one-man war against ChatGPT to not take my job. Like we're trying to keep it funny and humorous, and not take ourselves so seriously in the post. And that so far has worked pretty well in the sense of, it's like with all marketing, can we use the can we have a one-to-one correlation between, man, that guy clicked on the Instagram video and then immediately, clicked on the link to fill out a resume? No, you can't do that. But what you do get is do get anecdotal evidence that starts to appear when people come up to you, as Gary said in the beginning of the webinar, like, hey, I saw you on, so I was just at a recruiting event at UNCC, and several of the students said, yeah, I've been watching you on Instagram. Checked out your LinkedIn posts. Those are funny. Like that. Okay. That's exactly what it was designed to do, was exactly that.
And I would add to that, which you were going and touching on, which is have your own house in order. So, while you're recruiting them, they're checking you out. So if you have a website that looks like it hasn't been touched in 2 years, a lot of times I'll go down to the bottom and see the copyright and see if it says 2023, if it says 2020. Not that that's a good indication, because a lot of times that just gets forgotten when you're updating websites, but to show that you understand that in this day and age that a website is important as the public persona on your LinkedIn profile. If you haven't put anything on it, your business profile over the past 2 years, but you've been doing wonderful things, so just showing that you care about your image of your business so that someone would want to be a part of that, versus it being, okay, well, I guess if I join, I'll just do my job, and there's no pride in necessarily what the business persona is. I think that has a huge impact, and we are very purposeful in what we do on our website and in our social media and everything else, because we have basically a PR machine, marketing machine, but not everybody has that. So, but recruits are looking to, they're interviewing you just like you're interviewing them. So you need to keep that in mind.
Yeah. Another question. So this is good. Hold on here. Oh, Kurt has joined in. This is great. So I'll just read this. I personally believe that we're in the middle of a reset as the supply-demand dynamics have changed.
Yeah, I did want to hit on a comment about that is sort of thematically with our other, some of the other webinars that we've had, that, I think unless I misinterpreted the comment, that really was, hey, it's really great that this is becoming a little bit more of an employer's market, instead of an employee's market. It's like, look, guilty as charged. I've had those same feelings internally, and I probably have expressed them to Gary, like I words uttered out of my mouth have been, what we need is a good old fashioned recession, like without all the pain, but where people started to appreciate their jobs a little bit more, like, okay, well, that's me whining to Gary, but I think the reality of the matter, though, is I read some of the, as I've started reading some of these articles, and they're primarily centered on going back to the office to work, and remote work. And it's really like, CEOs demanding, CEOs say, and it really, the sense that I get is that people in our positions aren't really taking this as an opportunity to reflect or learn anything from this, which is like, oh, great, hey, we got a reset. It's about to become an employer's market. You roll back to the beginning of the tape. Now I have a gun to your head, Gary. You have to do what I said you had to do, because now I'm in charge. Now me, the boss, I'm back to being in charge. You're not in charge anymore. I'm back to being in charge because, damn it, it's harder to find a job out there now. It's like, isn't that acting like a freaking 5-year-old, I don't know. That's my toy, give me back my toy versus like actually figuring out, how to be adults in the conversation, kind of get behind a common cause, set some expectations and some boundaries and, behave as adults should behave. In other words, I think the employee motivational strategy, if you have to do it because I said so, because there aren't as many jobs out there anymore, is just, it's not a like it's a good short-term strategy. It does not seem like a very good long-term strategy. So I think I feel like what's best for us is to figure out how to break that cycle. And again, not, it doesn't mean that we have to just like, manage people out of desperation. You can have anything you want because, I just need you to be here, but we can use the opportunity to say, hey, look, I mean, maybe there were some things that we got wrong, pre-recession, that or pre-pandemic that we never fixed because we didn't have to, but now it's time to, now it is time to reset, but reset to instead say, let's go back to the way it was, which is what it appears like a lot of these articles are centered on, is like people's desire to go back to the way that it was, to more of a what do we really want it to be, that's mutually beneficial to all parties. Because look, I mean, at the end of the day, employee wants flexibility, and by employee wants flexibility, I think what we found is specifically that means the person already trained, that is extremely competent in the job and does not require a ton of supervision, wants flexibility. That may only be 25-50% of your workforce. There's a whole other part of people that it's like, either they can have flexibility due to the nature of the work, or alternatively, they may say, I want flexibility, but it's not realistic because they need the training. And the only way to do the training is really to be hands-on, sit next to the person, which means that some of the people that, could have flexibility can't have it in the way that they want it because they have an obligation as part of their job to help. That to me is part of an adult conversation. I totally agree and I trust you. However, somebody needs to train Timmy. How would you propose that we train Timmy, since we know, like, we have empirical evidence that training Timmy over Teams chat does not work? So help me co-craft a solution that works going forward, and I promise you I will not ask you to be any more inflexible than that. Sorry, I had to get a tirade in there somewhere, Gary.
Yeah, it's good. Well, I know Jason had to jump off here, but he had a last question. Remote work versus hybrid versus rules of the game that have changed on how to recruit, so much to dive into. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have been dealing with it. Some businesses and some jobs and roles just cannot be remote, period. You got an HVAC guy that has to go to your house because your air conditioner stopped working. Not that I've ever experienced that, but I have. And usually it's in August. But nonetheless, so what do you do in the services business? We had kind of a flexible policy that had to get even more flexible during COVID. And we're back to hybrid, where we're hoteling in our offices, so we don't need to use as much space as we once did. Seems to be working. Esprit de corps seems to be coming back because people are in the office at least 2 days a week because of training and just because of trying to build some commonality. But we've also had a couple situations where we did have a remote worker. We had a person that worked for us in Birmingham, Alabama, and another person in outside of Atlanta. And they were, adults that did not need adult supervision. They did great. And we're looking at actually establishing a beachhead in Guatemala. Why Guatemala? Well, it's not 9.5 hours away in India. and it's not as cheap as India, but we are finding CPAs, legitimate like CPAs in Guatemala, and Daniel McCollum with Torrent Consulting, who's a good friend and a client. He has 45 employees there. He moved his entire family from Charlotte, North Carolina into Guatemala. And they're just doing great. And so he has, because he has such a passion for what they're doing in Antigua, I think that's where they are, Antigua, Guatemala. They have found a way that they can help kind of Sherpa companies like us, where we actually have employees, but it's almost like a co-employment situation where they legally have the stuff, but it's like your culture, they're part of your team, dedicated, and some pretty amazing talent. So we're going down that path to just see. And he said, of all the Latin American countries, they've got great work ethics, and it's about a 40%, it's about a 60% less cost than American workers. So that's kind of an interesting thing that we're exploring too.
Yeah, we're continuing to see the impact of, and you mentioned remote working in that same U.S. Chamber of Commerce article. Shared a statistic. There's a Gallup poll that found that 91% of U.S. workers hope they could continue working some of their hours from home, and 3 in 10 workers signaled they would seek new employment if they were recalled to the office. Add that to, there was an announcement of a large national law firm that has an office here in Charlotte downsizing, moving from one building to another. And the managing partner basically said, we are accommodating different people's schedules and preferences working in the office. And so, we don't need as much space working at home, working in the office, and having kind of working suites that people can come in and, basically lay their, put their laptop into a plug, and then you have everything that you need, the camera, the dual screens, the external keyboard, the mouse. And then you can unplug and put it in your backpack and take it home. So the shift continues to be more accommodative. I still have issues with that going full remote or close to that, because I think that at least for us in a professional services firm, I have now, in my older years in my profession, have a responsibility, a social contract with the younger people in my office that we recruit to train them properly. And to Adam's point, you can't do that efficiently over a computer screen all the time. Yeah, there's a time and a place and ability, and it's efficient to do certain training, but then you have and I've said this before more than several times, the ability for someone, even a colleague that is in a different group that's my age, to come over and say, hey, a 30-second conversation that would take probably several minutes via emails back and forth, or me trying to find him or her on the phone in their office on their cell phone. So but also the mentoring that goes on. And I think that we have lost a lot of that. I think I see clients and I see ourselves as Shoemaker building that back up and understanding that that is important, and coming to the realization that if we don't do that now, the long-term effect is we're going to have people that should know what they need to do under certain circumstances in the middle of a deal, because I did it myself on here at home and just did it because it was easier to do it, where I should have walked down the hall and said, hey, associate, need you to do this. So they're not getting all of the little experiences that they should to build their experience and their professional talent. And I think that goes, beyond our doors to others, that it's just GSDing it, getting stuff done, rather than the burden of having to deal with the bad side of technology, which is having to find people when you're not physically present with them. So that's my little tirade about how technology is awesome, but it also can be detrimental if you're not careful with it.
Yeah, great point. A person that I talked to also today did quite well in the mortgage business. And guess how much work they're doing right now in mortgages? Not much. So they're actually looking to buy some businesses right now. They did well in that industry, but that does kind of beg the question on, as an employer, hey, I'm struggling to find people in this sector. Well, what about people that are in sectors that there's a downturn because of, especially, interest rate hikes and all that kind of stuff, that they're dying on the vine right now, or they're struggling, or people are letting people go. That would be another area of just getting really intentional about, okay, so it may not be a direct match, but do they have the same kind of thought processes, and are there transferable skills? Which leads me to the next thought, which is, there are a lot of grants available, more than I was aware of, for training and retraining and cross-training that should be considered. And I'm going to see if we could get Dan Flaherty, who has taken his business where it was kind of struggling, quite frankly, until he found out about all these grants that basically pay for his services to small businesses, small and mid-sized businesses. So that might be an interesting thing as we continue to talk about this. Like, well, what can I do? I need to get my people trained, to Jack's point. Let me see. So anyway, oh yeah. I just got a note back from Dan Flaherty. He could join us. So maybe next week, that's what we do. That'd be kind of fun, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So stay tuned on that one. That could be really good, because it was amazing to see what happened with him, because he had been like global head of sales for a number of GE units, operating units. And he was struggling with a franchise that he bought that was sales training, and primarily like VP, like interim VP of sales kind of thing. And then he was able to glom onto these programs. And I found out that there's some stuff that recently just opened up in Mecklenburg County, because Mecklenburg County was kind of geofenced around it. Like, there was not that much available, and now there is some stuff available. So that could be kind of cool.
All right. So while you were talking, I want to see if I can share this. So there are plenty of resources out there that will basically guide you through what is an efficient hiring process. And after I go through this, I'm going to put the link into the chat so you get it, so that we don't have to take notes. But and again, not my original content, but I thought this was very interesting. And there's paragraphs. So what I did was I just cut and pasted and put the paragraph heading. So I will share it with you. Okay, so this is an article that I found, Breezy HR. So give them credit, and so I don't get sued for copyright infringement or plagiarism. So there were these 20 things, and I was like, okay, it makes sense. So I'm just going to read through them. Use an applicant tracking system that aligns with your values. So, I think about many times it's, okay, we interview someone, I have the resume, I meet them either in person, and then it kind of is not my, I shouldn't say not my problem, that's mean, not my thing to do the next step, which is, okay, because we have hiring partners, we have office managers, we have managing partners. So that's, but it would be nice to have, and I assume that we do have a way of tracking things, but it seems like it's more of an as needed basis. And it's kind of like, well, we talked with this person, we need this person in commercial real estate, that kind of thing. You know, and you'll see, I'm not going to go through all of them, but a lot of this has to do with getting to know the person beyond what is on their resume. And so asking them things like, okay, are they problem solvers? Their relevant experiences, personal brand stories. I think a lot of times when we talk to candidates, it is, let me tell you about Shoemaker. And I think that the ones that are doing the interviews are good about doing a lot of listening rather than talking and answering questions, because that's a way of vetting them out too. Do they have an interest in Shoemaker? Do they have an interest in BGW? Did they go and look at that LinkedIn site that should be up to date and be attractive to candidates, and then ask relevant questions to us? You know, quantifiable achievements, hire for purpose people. So, you know, is it someone that is there because it's like, and this happened maybe about a year ago, we were looking for someone, and she says, well, yeah, I haven't really done that, but you know, I think I might be willing to learn that. And I was like, tried not to look at my partner that was sitting next to me, and I was thinking, did she just use, I think I might be willing? And we were just like, okay, you know, not even another thought about that. So, you know, but lead them to show their enthusiasm. And, you know, you do this enough, you'll see through that. So look for things that stand out, and then, you know, towards the bottom, use AI to assess personality traits. So I would be very careful about that, because I'm getting to know more about how AI is programmed, essentially. And we had a session on that several weeks ago, as to, you know, that what you get is only as good as what you put in to these systems. And sometimes, you know, if the foundation isn't as solid, you know, it may be that that becomes a problem. And then one thing that isn't on here is, and based on the recent Supreme Court holding on as far as gender or discrimination, but bias in hiring practices and selection for college admittance and those kind of things, that just need to be careful about. Oh gosh, I'm reading from a list that you guys can't even see, can you?
No.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. You should have told me. Yeah. So here's a list. Because I was like, oh, it's not showing. So, but yeah, and so that also, and this is going way off on a tangent, that will also develop and become a part of your hiring practices, to make sure that you, while you're trying to create and maintain a diverse set of workers, that you don't go over the line and ask questions that you can't ask. You could never ask, really, but now you really can't ask certain questions, but to not be fearful of getting to know that candidate better, kind of thing. So, but I will post, if I can, or I'll send it to Gary to post the link that has this 20 entry list, but there's a lot of information outside of that, you know, in the article. So
Yeah, send me the link and I'll post it in there, or you can put it in the chat too. Let me see what else we got in here. And we had a flurry of stuff on the front end of this stuff. Any other thoughts from the gallery? What you've seen work or been frustrated by what's not working? Oh, here we go. All right, thanks for putting that in the chat, Jack.
yeah, it looks like I can only send to the three of us, so you may have to repost that to everyone.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Well, we have to kind of corral these attorneys, because they can get away, you know, and before you know it, it's just a mess. All right, it's in the chat for everybody right now. I'd be curious, for anybody else listening, what are we missing Or is there something that's on your mind where like, what? Yeah, but what about this? Because I know we're not the only ones dealing with this. Everybody, the reason we're even doing it is because we keep hearing about it, and we're stuck in the middle of it too. Oh, while we're waiting for some of those things, though, one thing that we were talking about, social media, and a lot of people are not really comfortable dealing with social media, but I'll tell you this, what does not work is if you're using social media, LinkedIn in particular, as an advertisement for your company, and it's blah, 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 how great we are, it goes nowhere, because, people don't want to be sold to, and that's what it is. I've seen people just use it as, I'm going to go sell you something. People go, and LinkedIn is a really good place to go. We've won clients off of Instagram and other stuff, but at least our approach, and my approach in particular, and I know this is Adam's, I'm just who I am. I'm not going to try to be somebody I'm not. I'm not going to try to sell you on something. I just have thoughts and I have observations. I'm just going to be who I am. And that's what I would say to you. Just be who you are, because people can self-select, either I like this person or I don't, not my cup of tea. That's fine. But you are who you are. And too many people just kind of miss that, and they think, oh, I got to turn this into a commercial. Please don't. Because the millennials in particular, but I think nobody really wants to be sold. They just want to see if they can relate to you, and if you can provide some value on some, a lot of people have things worth talking about, even younger folks that have experienced stuff. It's a value. So
I'm going to throw something random in there, but it's related. So, and we've talked about this a little bit before, but not very much because it's really California centric, but I think it'll have impact sometime down the road on all of us in different states than California, which is there were two things going on in California on behalf of the ordinary person, minimum wage hour type individuals who the state legislature was proposing two fundamental changes to their laws. One was to treat a franchisor with joint liability of a franchise with a franchisee for things that happen at the franchised unit, which would turn franchising upside down, because the whole relationship is meant to be an independent contractor type relationship. And certainly a franchisor could cross the line, but most systems are designed so that, yeah, you have to do it our way, but you have to do it within the confines of your own state law, et cetera. So, and it was being pushed pretty hard through, and they were lobbying on both sides for all of that. I will tell you that the International Franchise Association, which I'm a member of, fought very hard against it for obvious reasons. The other component was increase in minimum wage for workers in California in these type industries. And so the compromise ended up being, and I have like a quick kind of term sheet, which is that all the stuff regarding joint employer liability was removed from the proposed legislation. And then new minimum wage for all limited service restaurants that are part of a chain with 60 locations nationwide, effective April 1, 2024 to $20 per hour. So that's what's happening in California. So you have, in line with what we're talking about, kind of minimum wage, lower wage in California, we saw what they did. Now, I will tell you, California does things and gets things through more so than the rest of the country. It makes doing business in California, having a beachhead, clients who have offices there, who have employees who do business there, it's more of a challenge than it is in many other states. And so, but I think that this is going to be indicative. And now those state legislatures or general assemblies, like in North Carolina, are one step closer to saying, hey, look, this is what's going on in California. There was a lot of scrutiny involved in that. So shouldn't we do something similarly in our own state in relation to, and it may not be restaurant workers, it may be some other minimum wage type employee. So I think that is something that will be coming eastward across the United States. I think there will be a lot of resistance. I don't think it'll pass in many states just based on the political slant, but I think there are some states that would say, this is a good idea. And so let's move forward with it and put it out there for consideration. And so just some current events related to what we've been talking about.
Yep, good stuff. Anyone else out there? Thoughts? Anything that you want us to be talking about that we haven't been talking about coming up? I have a feeling next week we're going to have to talk a little bit about budget showdown, because we'll be 2 days away from $1 trillion. So. All right. Well, any dad jokes or any useless trivia that we need to burn a Shoemaker Starbucks card on?
No, I wasn't prepared. I thought we, would end up in
Next
the
week,
entire
next
hour.
week.
So next week, yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything. So as I was telling you guys, I was up at Windy Gap, a Young Life retreat with my sons, his senior high school, entire high school, cooking meals for over 500 students and staff. And some interesting conversations go on when you have a bunch of adults in the back listening to, and the music was very, I don't know what station they had it on or what, is probably Spotify, but it went from like 60s to 90s to, we were just, it was catering to all generations, regardless of the fact that there was a specific generation in there. And it'll be a while before I eat spaghetti or pulled pork or chicken sandwiches or a chocolate chip cookie or a brownie, because you're not supposed to serve a broken cookie. Well, what happens to the excess stuff? So I'll be wearing stretchy pants for the next few days until I get back to where I need to be able to fit into my clothes. So, but yeah, I was thinking, did anybody say anything that I can repeat in a live telecast? So I'm thinking not. Yeah, so but I'll come up with something next week.
All right, that sounds good. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Next week, 176, and it looks like Dan Flaherty is going to come and be able to join us, and we're going to go into some grant money options that you may not be aware of that could help you on training and that kind of stuff and offsetting costs. So that'd be great. So, and he has just confirmed, so that'll be awesome. We'll put this thing up on the BGW CPA YouTube channel later on this afternoon. Thank you again, Jack. Thank you, Adam. And next week, I probably won't be wearing a collared shirt. See y'all.
All right. Bye.